Hello and good evening. Now the panel is complete. I'm very happy everyone is here. Here in the room and on the Zoom. You will see them afterwards. A warm welcome to everybody here at the Polit-Forum Bern, and also welcome to all of you who watch over the live stream. My name is Hanna Schad. I'm working here at the Polit-Forum Bern. The Polit-Forum Bern, or the Democracy Tower, provides a space for political dialogue. Part of it is our installation right next to my left, in which we approach democracy with 3 questions. Who participates in the democratic process? How do issues find their way on the political agenda? And how do we make decisions together? Democracy is a living and constantly evolving force. At the top of the tower, also at the top of the Democracy Tower, is the sound installation, Sounds of Democracy, where visitors can listen to a rich audio tapestry on what democracy sounds like. In this installation, we also present different ideas and visions on future developments of democracy. One idea is presented by Andreas Bummel. He's the director of Democracy Without Borders, who imagines a world parliament that represents the entire global population and makes the world more democratic. The question, how could the world community become more democratic, is also the topic of tonight's discussion. And we will talk about possibilities, needs, and examples of transnational political structures. The event today was initiated by Stefan Kalberer from Democracy Without Borders Switzerland. And this association promotes a democratic world government, including a world constitution and a directly elected world parliament. They aim for more global governance, global citizenship, and global democracy. The Polit-Forum Bern often receives inputs for new topics to discuss from civil society or activists or other partner organizations, and these suggestions are always very valuable for us, and we're happy about collaborations such as tonight. We see ourselves as an infrastructure for democracy, and we believe it's important to provide a space to enable a democratic discussion, exchange, and dialogue on these topics, which are important to different parts of society. So now, before we start, just some brief information for the audience. We will film the panel and also the questions from the audience for the live stream. Please let me know if you don't want to appear on this recording. It will be on YouTube later. Towards the end, we will open the discussion for you here in the audience at the Democracy Tower, and also for the people watching on YouTube. You can put your questions in the chat on YouTube or the Slido. It's linked in the description below the video. And I will bring the questions into the analog space here. You can also ask them in German. I can translate or try. Before we start the discussion on the panel, I will pass the word to Stefan Kalberer. He is president of Democracy Without Borders Switzerland, and he has a master's degree from the Europa Institute Basel in European Global Studies and is currently a PhD candidate at the Department of General Democracy Studies at the Center for Democracy in Aarau. He will briefly give you an overview on how democratic the world order is today and what kind of propositions for a more democratic world community already exist. So please welcome Stefan Kalberer. Thank you very much for being here tonight.
In June 2021, a group of 20 people met in Venice. This group were the Minister of Finance of the 20 largest and most important economies in the world. They came together to endorse the findings for the implementation of a global minimum tax. There are news like that 2 years ago that raised the question of whether we need global regulations, and if so, how they should be created. We live in a globalized world. The problems and challenges we're facing today are going beyond the scope of nation states. There is not one single nation that can stop global warming. Our companies operate worldwide, and digitalization does not know any national borders. And also our private lives are global. The clothes I'm wearing today, for example, are produced all over the world. And during my holidays, I will travel to different countries to meet friends there. So there is a mismatch there. On the one hand side, we have our economical and societal life, which takes place in a globalized world with no borders or with no strict borders. On the other hand, we have our political institutions, which are built and designed for nation states and which cannot tackle these global challenges in a satisfying way. So this leads us to the question, how can we deal with this mismatch? What can we do about that? And I argue that there are 3 options what we can do. Option 1 is that we don't regulate anything on a global level and we limit politics to the nation states. I think if we think about this option in more detail, it doesn't seem to be an attractive one, neither from a humanitarian perspective, nor from economic, nor from a democratic perspective. This leads us to option number 2. Regulations made by nation states on an inter- or multinational basis. This option is maybe the closest to the current system, where nation states form different institutions, organizations, where they discuss global issues. And indeed, there are a lot of international organizations that try to tackle these questions. These organizations, some of them are focusing on one specific topic, as for example the Bank of International Settlement here in Switzerland, focusing on international banking. Other organizations have more of a regional approach and focusing on one region, like for example the Council of Europe or the African Union. And other organizations claim to be universal. Here the most prominent example of course, would be the United Nations. But all of these organizations facing 2 major challenges, I think. The first challenge that they're facing is that their impact is limited. They have a limited impact because the actors, mainly the nation states, enacting within these organizations only can agree to the smallest common denominator. So there is not really ambitious targets and ambitious results coming out of these organizations. Another fact why these organizations have only limited impact is because important actors don't even take part within these discussions. And the last factor maybe is that there is no really effective enforcement of the regulations they put in place or they want to put in place. The second main major challenge these organizations are facing today is that they are not really democratic. Even though most or a lot of these organizations does have parliamentary assemblies, the parliamentary assemblies often does not take the decisions. The decisions are taken by representatives of governments, which of course and understandably have a national focus. They want primarily stand for the national interest. They want to defeat their national interest, and they want to be re-elected at the next national elections. So these global organizations does not only have a lack of a global perspective, but they also have a lack of democratic accountability, as the decision taker can't be accountable for their global decisions. So as well, the second option doesn't seem to be very attractive to me. So that leads me to the third option, forming democratic global institutions. And for that, we need to have a shift in perspectives. We need to have a perspective focusing on the global perspective and not the nation state. And that is a demand that is articulated by many different civil society organizations all around the world. And I want to pick up maybe 3 proposals that are circulated around the world, how we could forming such democratic institutions. The first one would be a world parliament, a parliament where politicians are elected directly by the world citizens. These parliamentarians would be able to really focusing on the interest of the global community and not focusing on the interest of national parties and national voters. Based on the principle of subsidiarity, this parliament could tackle in an effective way global challenges and put in place binding regulations. A second proposal would be a World Citizen Initiative, analog to the European Citizen Initiative that some of you may know from the European Union. With this initiative, a certain amount of people could sign a petition, and if enough people from enough different countries signed this petition, this proposal or this petition would be put into the agenda of the global institution. This global institution could be the World Parliament that hopefully would be in place then, or of course in the current system, the General Assembly, for example, of the United Nations or the Security Council. The last proposal, and that's maybe the most realistic to be in place in the near future, would be a special rapporteur on democracy. A special rapporteur, as we know, different special rapporteurs within the system of the United Nations, could have a focus on democratic developments in different countries in the world, but also on the democracy in the global sphere. And with that proposal, we could work towards more global democracy on the global scale. So to conclude, we live in a globalized world. Our problems go beyond nation-state scope, as I said already, and there is need for global regulations. And global regulations are already taken today. They are taken by institutions such as the United Nations Security Council or more informal groups as the G7 or the G20. So the question is not really do we need global regulations, but more how this or in what manner we want these global decisions to be taken. And I think the current system is not too bad, but it can be better. It does not fulfill our aspiration in a democratic sense, but I am convinced that a truly democratic global community is possible. And I'm happy to following the discussion to see how we could achieve and what obstacles are on the way towards global democratic institutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Stefan, for this introduction. Now, let's start with the discussion after a short construction break, and then I will pass the word to Marguerite Meyer. She's a moderator. She was the former head of multimedia at the Foreign Language Service of Public Swiss Broadcasting Corporation, swissinfo.ch or swissinfo.ch. And since several years, she's a freelance journalist with different mandates, for example, at the international desk of republik.ch, online Swiss online magazine. She recently returned to Switzerland from Tirana, where she lived and worked for a year, and I'm very happy that you are now here, and thank you so much for being here tonight, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Okay, hello, my microphone is on. Thank you so much. Okay, this was the construction. Okay, I see. Well, I'm very happy to be here tonight. Some of you might notice I have a bit of a runny nose. I actually just moved back to Switzerland a week ago from Albania, and it turns out Switzerland is very cold, so I caught a cold. I'm tested negative for COVID, so just so you know. Welcome to the panel discussion tonight at the Polit-Forum Bern. Hello also to the people on the live stream. We will be following the question today of how could the world community become more democratic? How can we bridge the gap between the economic globalization and political and social globalization? We will see different approaches, strategies. We will look at best practices and concrete examples, and also the challenges that pop up. We will try to show that the idea of a global democracy or transnational democracy is not just a visionary utopia, but it already exists in certain ways. And now, without much further ado, I would like to welcome my guests on stage. So I will start with the person to my left. She's Natalie Imboden. Many of you probably know her. She's a member of Parliament of Switzerland for the National Council and for the Swiss Green Party. She's involved and active also with the European Greens, and she has a profound knowledge of the Swiss federal political system. Then we have Dr. Siyana Gurova. She is a researcher at the Center for Global Competitiveness at the University of Applied Sciences in Zurich, ZHAW, and her research includes the transnational formation of political parties. Online, this is a hybrid event. We welcome two further guests. We have here, after Siyana, we have Rebekka Müller. She is the chairperson on the board of the pan-European party Volt in Germany. The party is active and has chapters in 31 countries in Europe. Then, last but not least, we welcome Gina Romero. She is currently in Colombia. She's the executive director of the Latin American and Caribbean Network for Democracy, which supports civil society to strengthen its role in democracy and citizenship across the South American continent. Welcome also to you two. Can you hear me, us? Yes. Hi. Great. Hello, dear audience here in the room, in Bern, and all over the world. I liked Hannah's expression before, in the room and on Zoom. We will have about an hour of discussion here, and there will also be enough time for audience questions. So maybe take notes if you're thinking of something, or think of the comments you want to give these panelists here. I'm very happy that we have such a great and very well-versed panel tonight. Let's start with Siyana Gurova. Maybe we should make clear in the beginning already, what does a worldwide democracy mean? It sounds very utopian or very visionary. What is a transnational democracy? Maybe that's a better word.
Thank you, Marguerite, for this question, because I think it's really important to start with defining the term so we are all on the same page. First of all, I would like to say that there is a difference between worldwide or global democracy and transnational democracy. And the main difference would be what it implies about the membership of that supranational governance institution, right? Because worldwide or global democracy would imply that all states around the world are involved in this new supranational structure, whereas the term transnational democracy is more feasible in a way, more achievable, because it just implies democracy beyond the nation state. It could mean that there is a regional formation that, say, the European Union, that has democratic elements. So there is a difference in the scope of such a project. At this point of history, I have to say that unfortunately we are very far away from anything even remotely near to global democracy. But when it comes to transnational democracy, there are certain examples of success. And not only in Europe, but also in Latin America, as we would probably hear later from Gina, and elsewhere. Sorry. What is transnational democracy again? Well, if we compare it to the national context, where democracy means the involvement of citizens in the decision-making, transnational democracy would apply the same principles, but to the transnational level, so beyond the nation state. The thing is that current institutions, like Stefan rightfully pointed out, just do not live up to these standards, right? And this is why it's a utopia, as you mentioned before. At the moment, international organizations are usually structured around national interests, both in terms of their institutional design and the way decision-making is happening within them. All these characteristics of international governance, we sometimes in academia call the so-called democratic deficit on the transnational level. The fact that democratic principles are not applied enough in international governance, so citizens are not included in the decision-making processes.
May I ask, is that on the level of the international institution, or does that have to do with the fact that certain member states of these institutions do not apply democratic values? Or
it's both.
Both.
Even in settings where you have only democratic membership of the international organization, still you would find that the national interests dominate within the organization, and also the decision-making processes are made such to reflect national interests defined in the singular. And we know that in order for democracy to function, we need a more pluralist way of thinking about things, and there is no interest defined in the singular in a true democracy.
Yes, thank you. Please switch off your phones.
I could maybe give you some examples of where transnational democracy or certain elements of it have worked out successfully. Probably the most famous example is, of course, the European Union, because it's a project, it's an integration project with a long history and a lot of successes behind it. But there are also some other places around the world where elements of transnational democracy have been applied, like in Mercosur, for instance, which is in Latin America. There is also a parliament there called Parlasur, which is composed of parliamentarians from the member states of this organization. Another example would be the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. So it's the parliament attached to the Council of Europe. It's the concept of Greater Europe, where we have also the countries from the former Soviet bloc. Russia was expelled from this organization in light of its annexation of Crimea and now the war it's waging against Ukraine. But yeah, there are also successful examples of transnational democracy elements, not of full-fledged transnational democracy. That doesn't exist at the moment.
Thank you very much, Siyana. I would like to give the word to the other panelists and would be wondering about the different forms of transnational democracy or approaches. So maybe each of you can just give a very short introduction into your organization and your approach, just a short one, like what do you do, without going into the details, which we will have a look at closer later. Gina, Romero? Hello? Here.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, yes, we can hear you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation. I'm so glad to be sitting here with this fantastic women. Our insights and ideas on democracy. In terms of our work, as I was presented, I am the director of the Latin American and Caribbean Network for Democracy, which, as its name stands, is a network of civil society organizations and social actors, including indigenous nations, Afro-descendant communities, LGBTIQ activists, religious leaders, and faith-based organizations, among others, that enhance the social sector capacity to promote and defend human rights and strengthen democracy in Latin America and some countries in the Caribbean. We do this by using several strategies, methodologies, and tools, but I want to highlight here, in relation of the topic of transnational democracy, one of our main strategies for advocacy, which is the citizen diplomacy. For those who don't know this concept, citizen diplomacy is a paradigm of international relations that arise when non-governmental actors become relevant actors in an effort to generate deliberation mechanisms and more inclusive and participatory decision-making in foreign policy. So I know that it has been mentioned before that the international organizations and bodies are not have only representatives of the governments, and also it was also said that it's important that also these international bodies have the participation of parliaments, for example. But then, when we taking into account the crisis of the democratic institutions that we have worldwide, having governments and or parliaments only is not actually a solution for making a more democratic country. So citizen diplomacy has been fundamentally promoted by different social movements and civil society organizations that found their intervention in multilateral organizations and their relations with actors of traditional diplomacy one way to advance in the positioning, defense, or the agendas. And this phenomena that actually means increasing the participation of movements and organizations which are at the least the representatives of citizens in the foreign policy has become a form on international pressure to achieve a response of the demands that domestic policy don't solve. Because I agree with what was said before, the domestic and national sphere is actually very, very small and narrow now for what the pressing problems and challenges that we are facing worldwide in terms of democracy, but human rights and other development and other issues. So actually, the work can be more democratic, but enabling and increasing transnational citizenship, transnational networks of citizens and civil society representatives to tackle some of the obstacles that were mentioned before. So I guess that probably in the next question I can go into some concrete examples from our work in Latin America, just to provide more information on how this citizen diplomacy works and how it can actually help not only to reinforce what is already there in the international scenario, but also to advance in some of the ideas that were mentioned at the beginning of these 3 tracks of possible actions to make the world more democratic.
Thank you, Gina. Let's move to Rebekka Müller in Germany.
Yes, thanks, and hello everyone, and thanks for having me tonight. So just to give you a little bit short introduction into what is Volt. So we are a political party, as you already said, Marguerite. We are actually present in so far 31 different countries in Europe, and we have been founded roughly 6 years ago. We just celebrated our 6 years birthday, actually. And we are convinced that, as what Stefan already said in the beginning, today's challenges are not stopping at national borders, like the climate crisis, but also the pandemic, as we have seen, also other challenges like digitalization or now the war in Ukraine. I think that is definitely a European issue, not considering even a global issue, maybe. Debatable, of course, but so those challenges don't stop at the national borders. So we actually need also political parties that are acting and thinking European at a first step. We could also discuss whether a global party would also make sense. But we are thinking European, but we also are convinced that we need to act locally. So that means that we do have our local chapters, our national chapters in those 31 countries. And we are tackling those challenges, so from a European perspective. And what is special about us, so we are the first European party in Europe actually, is that we have been founded initially on a European level by 3 different people on a European scale. And we do also have a policy framework that is on the European level mandatory to comply with on all the different underlying levels, so to say, meaning the national levels have to comply with the European level of policies. And that is different, of course, than when you compare it to, for example, different fractions like the Greens, for example, in the European Parliament, because they have different national entities which might run under different policies on the national level.
Thank you very much, Rebekka. So basically, Volt is a party that works its way down from the international level to the national or local level. There's another example of a party working its way up, so to speak, from the national level to the international level. Natalie, Imboden, you're also involved not just in the Swiss Greens, but in the European Greens.
Yes, thank you very much for invitation and to be here with this very interesting topic. As you said, I'm not only member of the Swiss Greens, but also member of the European Greens, and I can share with you my experience with this European and global organization. There I have to discuss later on with Rebekka, because I learned that the European Greens are the first party on the European level, but maybe we have to look at this later on. I didn't know that, okay, but I think it's not the problem. The Greens are organized on the international level. They are called Global Greens. There are from 100 different countries, Green Party members are on a global level sharing their experience. And also on the European level, I'm active on the European level. And then there we are all countries in Europe. Also Albania there is a small Green Party there, and when I was there for the last time in December, we met all together. We had a big congress with 1,000 people of all over Europe. It was really impressive to see Greens from Azerbaijan, that also belongs to Greece, to Albania. There I met the first Green Prime Minister. There's only one at the moment. He's from Montenegro, and Montenegro was added. They applied to be also belonging to the Green family on the European level. Maybe we can go on further on. I learned that on the European level, the European Greens have been founded 2004, but there had been before other levels of communication and organization. It started the late 70s. 79 was the first beginning, but the organization really on the European level now started nearly 20 years ago. And maybe just one thing to add: there are also networks for local people. It's not only working with the European Parliament and with the European issues, but there are also exchanges between green people, politicians or activists on the local level. And just one last word, I share completely what was said before. All the topics, climate change, the war in Ukraine, migration, and also economic, we can only find solutions together, and that's my conviction. We have to work together, European and also globally.
Thank you very much, Natalie. I would like to go a bit more in depth and hear a bit more about concrete examples you have from your work, and also know how you really work, because I think we all agree that we need international cooperation and tackling international problems with international solutions. But I think it's very interesting to hear what the actual work looks like. So I would like to go to you, Rebekka, since you are one of the, you have the experience of building from an international party to, I'll say, lower level, or as you put it, think European, act locally. How does that concretely work when a new chapter or a new party is founded within Volt? I understand you also have a small chapter in Switzerland.
Yes, we do. All across Europe, we are about 27,000 members so far, and volunteers, so to say, that are working together on all the different levels. And as mentioned, we also have a chapter in Switzerland, and we don't really foster a top-down approach here, but rather say, as I mentioned, act locally. We need actually the bottom-up approach when it comes to starting up a new chapter. So that means that there is an initiative by someone on the ground who says, okay, I share those values that the organization and the party Volt has. I share the policies. I would like to become politically active and engage. What can I do? And then, of course, we do have on the European level, we have an expansion team that is supporting those local initiatives to found a new chapter, which happened, for example, in Switzerland, but also just recently, because the Swiss chapter has actually been founded in 2019. There's roughly 100 members so far. But just recently we founded, for example, Volt Ukraine, because there were 2 to 3 people in Ukraine that said we need actually Volt, and we need the party Volt here also in Ukraine, even though we are completely focusing on other topics right now. But we need to be politically active here. And then the European level, especially the European, our president, so to say, they support the foundation of a new group. We deliver the framework, we deliver the values, we do have different teams that are supporting, for example, building up a community, or how to work with developing policies on the local level, making sure that, for example, the European policy framework is actually included and considered when developing own policies. And that is rather there setting the framework and empowering on the ground what is happening on the ground, than, so to say, pushing the development of a new chapter top down.
So as I understand, the local chapters are pretty free within the mapping of their local policies within a framework that is given from the international level. Who decides on this framework? How does that work?
Yeah, so we do have a general assembly that is taking place once a year, always in a different city, where all party members are invited and we make important decisions. So it's clearly a democratic process where we also vote on policies. For example, when it comes down to the preparation for the European election happening in 2024, we are right now developing a policy framework or an actual program that is also developed in a very democratic approach, because we say everyone who wants to participate can participate in the process. And then in the end, it's also voted upon in the General Assembly, as well as the policy framework, as you have been asking for, of course. So that is a constant process. The policy process is a constant process that is ongoing, basically. You could say also, and compared to policy development on national level, for example.
So basically, you have just added another extra level to what is a classical party, basically.
Yes, we did. But of course, what you need to consider, and I thought that was also interesting, what Siyana said in the beginning, is that right now what we see in the different transnational organizations is that there is mostly different nations coming together and pushing for national interests. And that is something that we need to overcome. So we need to have a more European, but also, of course, more global approach to that. And that is, of course, what we try to do here and try to achieve, that we have a European approach in the beginning, and then translate that to national levels, but always considering what is best for all across Europe, all the citizens, and not considering, okay, how can I push, for example, from a German level, on a national level, how can I push on the European level to basically, foster German interests on the European level.
Thank you very much, Rebekka. Let's move to Gina, because I think maybe your approaches are maybe not, it's not quite the same institutional framework, since you are more of a network than an international party, but you also work very much with a bottom-up approach by building a form of transnational citizenship, as you say. Can you give us a bit of an example how within your different, you don't have chapters, right, as I understand it, of the network within the different countries in South America?
Well, we don't have something that is chapters. We have like focal points in different countries, so far in 19, and also we have focal points or leaders for a thematic or population representation. So one of the examples that I can present is actually another network that is that was created and REDLAD has the secretariat, that is called the Citizen Forum of the Americas. So this is a network of civil society organizations and social actors that is articulated in 19 countries in order to create civil society agendas with wide consultation in each country, and then use those agendas to advance in actually three very concrete aspects. One, to advocate actions at the different bodies, especially the Organization of American States, which is our regional body, the UN, the regional and global human rights systems, and other international bodies and organizations such as the Community of Democracies. The second thing that these agendas are used to follow is to follow up on commitments acquired by the governments in those international scenarios, reviewing how these commitments and priorities are aligned or match the citizen agendas, but also the legal commitments and internal decisions that the governments are taking at the national level, because sometimes there is a complete disconnection between what the governments say and approach and actually decide at the international level with what it is actually decided at the national level, which is like something very interesting. And then the third thing that they do is to advance in the building of collective actions to mobilize citizens around those agendas and commitments, and the creation of partnership with other sectors like the entrepreneurial sectors or others. So right now we have 23 civil society agendas that have built and update From those 16, for now, we are increasing 3 this year, have a national scope. One hemispheric, which collects the views of the different national agendas, 3 sub-regional agendas, and this is very important because although the continent is one, there's like very different problems and challenges between them. So the South challenges are different to the Central American challenges, for example, and then 3 thematic and population agendas. That includes the indigenous nations, the represented communities, and the other groups that I already mentioned. And besides those agendas, we had 4 reports on government commitments that had also national, sub-regional, and thematic sphere. And to these, nearly 500 organizations and actors directly participated in the process, but then, as you can imagine, this number is a lot higher, taking into account that these organizations are grassroots that work with an extensive network of actors, or we are talking about nations at the indigenous level, which is a broader conception. So in summary, we have actions at the national level to collect inputs and to coordinate what is the voice of the national level, and then at the sub-regional level, at the hemispheric level, and at the global level, which is what we do in terms of building up. This is from bottom to the top. And then also then all those representatives that go to the different international scenarios that report back, and we do this constant flow of pressure, articulation, and information. All the different citizen actors that are involved around the Citizen Forum of Americas. So that is just in a nutshell. It's a lot long, but that's like the short summary I can do.
Thank you. So just one more question. You mentioned the sub-regional agendas that you have, the 3. And I was wondering how they are formed. Are they formed based on these 23 civil society agendas, or are they fed out of this, or do they? Yeah, how are they? Because this is the transnational level, right? How are they formed?
Yeah, so it's a dual process. So one, we have the inputs from the national agendas, but then the national representatives are gathered together in the sub-regional or hemispheric level just to actually build up on those national ideas to build the collective view on the sub-regional and then hemispheric level. So we have the dual, we have the information that flows from the national level, but also the decision-making, the collective decision-making for the sub-regional and the hemispheric agenda.
Thank you, Gina. Let's move to Switzerland. Allegedly has the best democracy in the world, as we always like to say. Natalie, Imboden, why should Switzerland care about a transnational democracy?
Okay, difficult. If we were the best democracy ever, then we could export maybe some of our things we have done good. I think Switzerland has a lot of good sharings, but it's on the one side in our constitution it's written that we want to share or we want to support democracy worldwide. It's even in our constitution, it's a goal. But on the other hand, we don't want to share our life with European Union, so we don't want to be a part of European Union. So it's quite difficult. Maybe we are a little bit of schizophrenia in this question. But what can we explain? I think one thing that's really a good experience we have. This year is the anniversary of 175 years of Swiss constitution or Swiss modern constitution, and okay, then only men, only Catholic men, only rich men could participate. Jews, women, and the poor were not there, but all other men could. And we managed to find a solution between the cantons, our regional level, and our federal level. So our constitution is based on a big consensus. We are also a country of consensus. We find a solution. It's maybe not the best, but it was practical. The only one we could find. Maybe learnings we can take from it. Okay, if you have to work together, you have to find, you called it the smallest denominator. Maybe it's not big, but to start you can start there, and then you can develop. For Switzerland, I don't want to go in the details, but in 175 years ago we had a civil war in Switzerland. Nowadays nobody is talking about that there was a civil war in Switzerland, but it was a solution after a war. And the other thing I think we have in Switzerland, we have different cultures, different languages, and we manage more or less, sometimes more less than more, to communicate together in different languages. And I think that's one thing that's important also to work on the European level, and also to accept the differences and to find solutions. But maybe I can shortly take one thought of Gina, because she said that sometimes we are telling stories, or the government is telling stories, and it's not the truth. And also for democracy, I think it's very important that we reflect what Swiss democracy has really done, and we have a lot of good things also with direct democracy, but also where are the limits. So you have to visit the tower here, where are the limits of Swiss democracy. And so I think it's very important to be honest and not to repeat that we are the best democracy, but because if you want to work with other people, I think the best is to take the best of all together and not to be the one who is the best.
What are the limits of Swiss democracy?
I think one big limit is that we are a country in European-wide scene that excludes a lot of people. We have, to get the Swiss citizenship, we have extremely high borders. It's extremely difficult, so that in Switzerland 1 of 4 people has no right to vote, and that it's in all other European countries, or nearly all, it's never, no country excludes 1 of 4 persons. So I think that it's one of the biggest deficit. I think tomorrow in the same tower there will be a debate about this, to change it. To allow more people in Switzerland to take part in democracy, because the best democracy that includes 1 of 4 persons is not the best democracy.
Thank you very much, Natalie. We might get back to the smallest common denominator later. I would like to go to Siyana, Gurova. In our pre-call, we had pre-calls on the phone last week. You mentioned that direct democracy can also be the tyranny of the majority. How does this apply to a transnational level?
Yeah, so the idea of direct democracy would be another way to solve this democratic deficit, allegedly, right? But as you can imagine, and as you well know, direct democracy is really hard to achieve even on the national level, where we're talking about less preferences, less people, less diversity, right? So on the transnational level, I think direct democracy is just not applicable. And another reason why it wouldn't work is that if you put it to the extreme, direct democracy actually leads to the tyranny of the majority, right? If you always need 51% to take a decision, how are the interests of the remaining 49% represented? So this is why I don't think that it's applicable to the transnational level. What would probably work much better is something that Rebekka started talking about, and it is the creation of truly transnational political parties. A real solution to the democratic deficit would entail like getting rid of this territorial element in like always thinking about international governance in terms of national interests. If we keep on thinking in terms of nation states and their interests, I don't think that anything can change. But one way to see it in an alternative way would be to look for the common denominator that we already talked about, right? To look for identities and values that are cross-cutting national borders, and let citizens build groups or unite based on these cross-cutting values. And I think our best bet for that is the emergence of transnational political parties. And this is the case because parties might be bad. They're far from perfect. There is corruption, they represent special interests sometimes, etc. But at the same time, they're our best invention so far as to how to aggregate different interests, different preferences within a society. And this is why I think they could be the vehicles that serve that purpose of coming up with the common denominator, of formulating the policies around common denominators and representing groups other than nation states or regional groupings of states.
How, to be a bit more specific, how do we bridge the gap between maybe, like, let's just assume someone in Colombia and someone in Switzerland say, okay, let's found a party based on certain values we might share, but the contexts might be very, very different. So how this party would formulate its agenda, also based on the context it is operating in, isn't that a huge gap?
There is certainly a big gap between countries when it comes to values and norms and preferences within the societies. This is absolutely true. What is considered left-right in politically speaking, left and right in Europe is not the same as the left and right in Latin America. Or even within Europe, you have differences between Western Europe and Eastern Europe. Right? So there is you can make the case that there are significant gaps. However, the whole point of establishing a political party would be to close that gap. Right, to look for that common denominator. And what Volt is doing, what Rebekka was telling us about, is basically the first step in that direction. Not just having different political parties of similar ideological bending in the different member states, but to have a truly transnational party that also has formulates policies transnationally. So they sit together and they come up with what's the European interest, not the interest of Switzerland or of Germany. What's the European interest of European citizens? And I think that this is the right direction. It's still very early. It's still in its inception. Basically, Volt is the forerunner in that. And I'm really happy to see that there is such a party. But I think it's the right way to go.
How do we operate like this and form these kind of parties or interest groups, whatever we want to call them, political interest groups, internationally when still so much is happening on a national level? And we're not just, like, we're talking about Switzerland or Germany, fine, but then there are And there are countries also within Europe where the formation of a nation state is not a sign of like nationalism, like conservative nationalism, but a sign of liberation, let's say, from like Kosovo, for example, or Ukraine right now. It's not forming a nation state, but it's in danger. Yeah. So we still are very much, in reality, working with nation states.
Yes, and this will continue to be the case for the foreseeable future. I'm definitely not saying that we should dissolve the nation state. This is neither possible nor desirable at this point in history. And there are different types of nationalism. Some, you could argue that some are healthier than others. But like I said, nationalism is here to stay, especially now with the backlash that we are seeing against globalization and with recent developments like the decoupling that is happening between the US and China and also the war in Ukraine. It's definitely, we're not going to see in the near future a global parliament or anything of that magnitude. At the same time, I'm pretty sure that we should start from somewhere with defining the common denominator. And there is no, there will always be a tension between the national and the transnational level when it comes to the different policies, etc. But I think that they can coexist and we can have nation states, but also transnational governance that is democratic, that is inclusive, and that works.
Thank you. Would anybody like to add something from the panel? Yes. Let's go to Rebekka first.
Yeah, maybe I would fully agree to that. Maybe to just give you an example. If we take, for example, on the European level, we do, of course, need to tackle the climate crisis, right? And then we need to implement those laws,
regulations also on the national level. But supporting what has been decided on the European level, on the national, and then top down on all the other levels where political engagement is happening, that is very important then to always consider also the European or the global perspective. Just to consider when we talk about the climate crisis, that we feel the consequences, and I guess Gina, you can say also something regarding that, especially in the global south, right? So we need to, in that perspective, the common denominator here would be tackling the climate crisis, but also considering, okay, what is this that the global south needs from the Western countries to actually do in order to fight this. And that, I think, is something, if we take that approach and consider always what we need on the different levels to do, to consider all the best interests, I think that would be, of course, an ideal approach. And we are definitely, what you already said, Siyana, we are not perfect in that way, also as Volt, because we are a young organization, we are only 6 years old. And we don't have the perfect solution, but we're working on it. And we are kind of facing the challenge, not always coming up with the best solution, but at least trying to do that by finding policies, but also finding a common denominator when it comes to values, for example. We have a project running that is called Revalue Volt, where all the different members who would like to interact on what has to be the common denominator in terms of a value framework can interact in that. And then this is also then voted upon in our General Assembly happening in June in Bucharest. And also when we come, for example, on the national level here in Switzerland, or not here because I'm in Germany, but where you are locally right now in Switzerland, as we have the Swiss chapter there, you can just meet them in a meet and greet and just interact with them, become a party member, and engage, and then, of course, also work on policies on the European level immediately, because if you are a party member, it doesn't really matter where you are located. You can work on the different levels wherever you prefer. And I think as we are also in a digital century, that is actually possible. And we should, take that as a base and work constantly on those challenges to overcome them.
Thank you, Rebekka. Let's move to Gina. I see a hand there.
Thank you. It's very interesting to hear about the political parties as like this aggregation of the possible responses to the common denominator. And I think that I like a lot what Rebekka says in terms of that the common denominator is not one actor, but probably one challenge or topic that we need to address collectively. And that makes a lot of more sense. But I really would like to try to go back to the idea of the political parties as the aggregator of necessities and the representatives of citizens. Because probably in Europe is different. I really don't know the data, but in Latin America and I'm sure in Africa too, which are like two of the major members or representatives of the global, what is called the global South. The political parties are like in a deep crisis, and the citizens don't trust the political parties. And mainly this is because the citizens see the political parties as the drivers, and the groups that have like the lead on the biggest challenges that the citizens see as their own, and the major problems as corruption. So at some point, just to try to build up a new democratic idea based in these institutions that are actually not very representatives of the citizens' needs, and also that have a lot of problems related to legitimacy and also trust from the citizens, it's a little bit weird for me. So I don't know if at some point there is like a view on how actually to come first, just to kind of clean up this idea of the political parties and just how to build up a new political party system or a new view of what is a political party, just to try to build up among that, or on top of that, the building of a more democratic system. And this is why it is very important. It is not because it is my field and the group I work, but this is important just to see what is actually thinking the citizens and what is actually the civil society as a citizen, as one of the citizens' representatives, just to see about the whole process. Because at least in Latin America and in Africa, I don't know much more about Europe and Asia and actually the global north. Probably the political parties look like a good match, but I am very sure that in the South and the global South that is not the same case. So how can you bridge that? It's just an open question that I leave for the table.
Who would like to answer?
Can I answer?
Yes, I think both.
I think from a European perspective, but for me, there is no opposition between civil movements and political parties. For me, both are needed, and I see it also in a manner to work together. They have different opportunities, different backgrounds, but as I said, for climate change, if there is no social movement on this world, it's needed to also to push the governments really to find a solution. The same for the feminist movement, abortion rights in Poland, in the United States. There are topics that that's work for parties. I think they have the their role is to agree to find solutions and to find political solutions. But for me, I'm really convinced and was ever, and I hope I will ever be, that we need both. We need grassroots mobilizations and civil movements, and we need parties. And in the European perspective, it's maybe less this topic of corruption, but also in Switzerland, a lot of people think that parliamentarian politics, they are all rich and ugly and I don't know, whatever, corrupt. And but I think that's a big topic, but I fight also for, we fight for transparency also in this work, not to have corruption. But one last word and really the topic of climate change, there we need all work together. There are no borders. Climate change has no borders. We are all there is only one world we have, and we have to manage it together, and all on every level. It starts on this road here, and it goes to New York, to the United Nations, from Africa to the North Pole. And I think that's really, if we don't manage to solve this problem, then we have a big problem.
You just said climate change has no borders, and maybe everybody agrees on that, but like the person arguing for atomic energy, nuclear power, atomic energy, direct translation from Swiss German, nuclear power might be as interested in tackling the climate crisis as someone who argues for, I don't know, something else, right? So the solutions of how to tackle an issue vary a lot. Like how many regulations do we need? How much does big industry have to be regulated? Is it an individual problem? Like the solutions are very different, or the ideas of solutions. So how can we say that a large issue, such as tackling the climate crisis, can be a value under which a transnational or even on a global level party can formate? Conform? How?
Okay, first of all, I totally agree with you that there should be no tension between having a healthy civic society and having political parties. Those two can and should coexist together. And when I started my defense of political parties, I made the disclaimer that they are not perfect. Just like no democratic model is perfect, the same is valid for parties. However, despite their imperfections, they're still really good at simplifying choices, at bundling different issues in coherent policy programs, at aggregating different preferences. And the more people we have, and on the global level we have more people, right, compared to the nation state, the more preferences to aggregate we have also. So I still think that they're a very viable option with certain reforms to avoid the shortcomings or the pitfalls of political parties have. They're also really good at forging policies and then also implementing them. And I also think that, at least in the beginning, transnational democracy will be a rather top-down process and not so much bottom-up. And it's somehow easy for us to sit here in Switzerland where people have really high political culture and are engaged in political decision-making. But this is not the case around the world. People typically don't have that high political culture as it is here. So parties could also be the ones involving citizens, like motivating them, educating them, raising the awareness about different issues, including climate change. So I still believe in parties. Yes, they are in crisis, not only in Latin America, also in Europe, I would argue. But I don't see transnational governance advancing further without political parties at this point.
Okay, I see that was a very strong defense. At this point, I would like to open up the discussion with the audience. I'm sure you have questions or comments to any of our panelists. There is a microphone, I think, going around. And also the people in the live chat, hope you're still here and still watching and have many questions. Hannah will translate them from online to offline as well. But first, let's go here.
Ich denke, ich probiere zuerst auf Englisch. Da muss ich da schauen. Ich habe mir Notizen gemacht. What possibility as a transitional democracy with the problems of war, conflict, nuclear threat, raw material, epidemic, problem only few government manage today. Is this utopia democracy without borders? What with the sovereign state like Hungary, Orban? What democracy role could be recognized by different countries? Can Switzerland provide answer to such inequality and demand for right?
Okay.
The European Union has most problem. England is the fourth democracy in the world, but she not collaborating in the European Union.
Okay, I think there are two questions in there. I will try to tangle them apart. One question is, I think, a bit condensed. How do we... Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Do you want to repeat?
So,
did you hear it?
Part of it, yes.
I think
Auf Deutsch vielleicht.
Ich glaube, Sie haben verstanden. Also die Schweiz hat ja auch Probleme, die innere Minderheiten oder zu lösen, oder? Und innerhalb von diesen vier Sprachregionen. England war ja die erste Demokratie der Welt und hat trotzdem Schwierigkeiten innerhalb der EU sich zu positionieren oder akzeptieren. In der Welt gibt es ja, Sie haben es ja gesagt, diese Atomikdrohung, gibt Globalisierungsprobleme von Ökonomie, Umwelt und so weiter. Ist das nicht eine Utopie? Es wäre sehr schön, natürlich, aber wie bringt man Russland, China und Indien zu kollaborieren, wenn sie in der UNO schon nicht kollaborieren?
Okay, I think that's a very the last question is a very clear question. How do we, in the current world that we are facing today, many people are talking about a shift to a multipolar world. How do we bring Russia, China, the US, and India to collaborate on a transnational level when it doesn't look like it is happening right now?
One answer, I have no one, there is no one answer. I think an evening like this is, we try all to find an answer. As you said before, parties are not perfect. Democracy now is not perfect. You told it in the beginning. Our democracy is not perfect. We have UN, the Security Council, UN Assembly, and we had to experience that there is a war. Everybody wanted to prevent the war, except the aggressor. everybody wanted to accept, everybody hoped we could find solutions, and we couldn't. But that's not the reason. The answer is not we should stop the institutions, we should enforce the institutions, we should make better institutions, but that's the big question in the Security Council. China and Russia have minority veto positions, and to convince somebody to find a new solution there, we have to discuss, we have to make clear that war is no answer in this world anymore. That was also the reason that UN was built. Maybe after this war, I hope so, the war, as everybody, will be finished once. Maybe the lessons learned is we have to find other solutions to enforce peace building, peacekeeping, not war, not weapons, but to enforce all these peacekeeping instruments. There are there, but at the moment, yes, we have to find to strengthen these answers. That's the only answer I can give you, but I know it's not a clear and easy answer. But maybe you have another.
Mine is actually similar, but also different. So bear with me. For one thing, I completely agree that currently, with its current institutional design, the UN, both the Security Council and the UN General Assembly, are neither democratic nor effective. Therefore, one way to improve the situation would be to strengthen international institutions like the UN and reform them completely. And one of the solutions would be what Democracy Without Borders is campaigning for. It's the establishment of a real international parliament, either being another chamber attached to the UN General Assembly, or being embedded in an institution like the International Parliamentary Union, for instance. So that would be one step, strengthening and or reforming existing institutions, or creating new ones from scratch. Another measure that we could take to make the democratic community, to make the international community more democratic, would be to encourage citizen participation, and this is something we heard about from both Gina and Rebekka. Another solution I have to that problem would be reducing economic inequality, both between and within countries, because if we don't, we'll reproduce the same institutions where, let's say, the rich and powerful North is controlling the South, or the more powerful countries are hijacking the new institution and still making the rules and taking the important decisions as it has been in the past. Empowering civil society would be another important step in that direction. And finally, fostering civic education. So, like I argued before, political culture is not as high everywhere around the world as it is here. And we need to educate people and let them know why they should be interested in global governance, why it affects their lives, why there are issues that cross-cut national borders and need transnational solutions. So that's it. 5 steps. Oh, but it's not.
I think, yes, Rebekka and Gina wanted to add something? Yes, Gina?
But Rebekka has her hand up. So
Oh, it switched.
Go ahead, because I think, Siyana, you said already so much. I can only agree to that.
Yeah, well, for sure I agree with what was said before, but I want to make a comment that will complicate a little bit the take on this big four. And it is that although it may seem that these big four actors are like the main obstacle or something related in the international arena. We need to take into account that there are other major actors that are actually making really hard the advance on agendas such as climate change and other related to the environment. And those are the major corporations. So we need to understand that although it seems that we are in a world that is still moves from a national level perspective, we have these major, huge actors that are transnational corporations that are not democratic at all, because they are just enterprises that are actually in the shadow, if I may say this, are more strong powers that decide and even push national states and international organizations and so on to make the decisions and to make nearly impossible to fight against all these challenges that we have. So in the specifics, in the issues of the environmental protection, it's not the personal consumption that is going to shift the situation. It's not even all the decisions that are made at the national level can help, but if you see there are the major corporations who are actually taking decisions and pushing forward, or actually doing a backlash on decisions related to the care of the environment. So it is very important to think about Russia, about China, about the US, about any others. But what about those transnational groups, and which is the role of those transnational groups in thinking a new transnational democracy? This is something that we need to think more, going beyond, again, the national identities and the national powers. I'm sorry, it's not a response because I have no idea about how to tackle about that. This is just to make more complicated the situation, because the reality is very complex.
Thank you. One second, but let's wait. Thank you, Gina, for that very, very important comment on major corporations.
When there are other questions,
maybe there are other people who have a question as well. Ein Moment. Ja, aber ich würde aber gerne schauen, ob andere Leute noch eine Frage haben. Da hinten ist noch eine Frage.
Wo standen vom nicht bereit wären, ihre Rechte abzugeben oder ihr Wohlstand abzugeben. Und das verlangt natürlich eine internationale Demokratie.
Okay, so a comment more on that certain countries or certain people in certain countries would have to be willing to give up a certain level of wealth in order to have a real international democracy. Thank you for that comment. Okay, there was a question there.
Yes. Darf ich dasselbe? Okay. We spoke about the lowest common denominator. And I think this is a very, very interesting subject. Democracy also needs a lowest common denominator. And it will be quite difficult to transfer this denominator globally. So I think what we all should do, we all 8 milliarden of people, we should find for the democracy some subjects they are really concerning us all. I think we can leave the nations, as you told us. We does not have to strike against nations. But we have several common parts, like our health and our climate, the air, the lakes, and we have to find ways how we can combine this for all together. And I think for these subjects, democracy could help all of us. So I wanted to little bit to hear from you four what you think about a World Council on Environment, but that only includes and excludes the climate part and not the political part. Because I think there we could have a chance to really to cooperate with everybody.
Thank you. Can we think climate justice or climate crisis evasion or betterment without a political part? I mean, you're from the Greens, so I'm kind of.
I think it's quite an interesting idea, but for me, politics you can't separate. I think, as Gina told us before, climate change is also an issue of economic differences. You told it also. We have big issues. Maybe the COP, the Council of the Climate Cooperation. There are, it's a UN-based, like the climate agreement from Paris. This was one of it. The last one was in Sharm el-Sheikh. There are the states are representing the countries, but also the civil society is there. It's not only the presidents are there. One part of corporations are there. Sometimes it's difficult, even as mostly if the full fossil industry is negotiating their exit. But there is really, they intend to discuss the climate change topic, but you can't, health is also connected. Education work is also connected. Economic questions are also connected. So I think to discuss one topic is good to find solutions, but you can't find it without cooperation with other topics. So for me, this World Council of Climate, you mentioned it, maybe we have it already with this COP. The next one, I think it's where the next one is. It's not Sharm el-Sheikh, and then it's in Eastern Asia, I think, again. And there they are discussing, and one big step they made last time, or it was some months ago, that they decided that we have to help the southern world to do their work for climate change. And there is we need economic support. They agreed on the principle, but they didn't agree who is paying how much. And that's the next question, because we in the north, we did worse in the last decades, and we have to find a solution also with European money and with Western money we have to give.
Thank you very much. Rebekka is holding up her virtual hand.
Yes, maybe to add, so the next COP is actually taking place in Dubai.
Dubai, yes.
But I think maybe to contradict a little bit what you said, Gina, I mean, if you listen to a lot of different voices from civil society and also climate activists, they say that the COP actually failed last time, and it failed also the previous times, because as you also mentioned, the necessary actions didn't take place, or the necessary regulation didn't take place, and there was no commitment to actually fight climate change. But I think what could be an option is that a council would be formed giving all the different activists a combined voice, so to say. Because what we see, for example, when it comes to Germany and Fridays for Future, and I can only speak here now from experience from Germany, but I think Fridays for Future, of course, is kind of a global initiative, more or less successful in the different countries. And we can see that there is a lot of pressure put from this movement on the ground and on political parties and political decision-making processes. So if that didn't take place beforehand, I think, at least in Germany, we wouldn't discuss achieving the climate targets that we are right now. We're actually not achieving those, but at least, yeah, the regulation that is taking place right now, I think, wouldn't have been so far if it wasn't for Fridays for Future, for example. And if there is an enforcement of those civil society movements in a council that is actually taking more pressure up to political parties and political institutions, that could be an idea, but I think it's very difficult to overcome.
Thank you very much, Rebekka. At this point, I would like to ask, do we have any questions from the live chat?
Not yet.
Not yet, but here's a question in the audience.
It's not a question, it's I'm just trying to challenge you a little bit. I have several question marks on this very positive and promising concept, but I'm convinced that to get people that are understand themselves as political actors, you need some ties to local democracy, to democracy based on the ground. So to get people with a political self to then to develop a transnational perspective. First point. Second point is that I think still today national and cultural identities are very strong, and all other kinds of identities. And when we take that in consideration, I really have doubts if this concept of transnational parties are very promising to activate citizens to being part of a transnational problem-solving democracy. So maybe you have some answers on that.
Who is the question going to? I think nobody particular. Okay.
No, maybe Siyana. Yes, maybe Siyana. But all
sure.
The others as well. Yes.
Everybody.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I have to agree with you completely that national identities are still much stronger than transnational identities, and this is most probably going to be the case also in the foreseeable future. However, if you think about the long way that we have already, all the achievements that we have had in that direction already, only 75 years ago, Europe was at war, right? And it looked as there is no solution to war within the old continent, sparking every 10 years or so to resolve conflicts that have been there for intractable conflicts that have been there for ages. But then European integration started happening, and initially it had only an economic dimension, then it progressed into a more political union. By the time the European Union, as we know it today, was created in '92 with the Maastricht Treaty, it was already like a fully fledged international organization with a lot of competences in different policy domains, and also in such domains that were considered to be solely the prerogative of nation states, right? And this happened only within 70 years or so. This gives me the hope that in the long term, maybe transnational democracy is not a utopia. It's possible. We just have to work hard and be smart about it. Yes.
there is a people's right within the EU, the European Citizens Initiative, and I think it has been founded more than 15 years ago, and so up to now it hasn't created a lot of dynamics within the member states and the citizens of these member states. So yes, this is a not very promising sign.
Maybe I would like to go to Gina in a second, but maybe we can add here that from how much I can see, maybe you can add more to this, Gina, but large social movements have always been international or transnational, like the fight for women's rights or LGBTQ rights or indigenous and First Nations rights movement have always been with a bit of delay, especially in Switzerland when it comes to women's rights, but with a bit of delay, but has always happened as a large push. Gina, I saw you wanted to.
Yes, that is one of the points precisely that I wanted to say, that although you can see that at the national level there are a lot of a lack of political involvement from citizens, and it has been said a lot before by the other members of the panel that we need to reinforce the citizen education, which is true, and I fully agree. We had in the history a lot of movements that have been transnational and that don't consider this idea of national identities, and this is something like the traditional national identities, and this is something in which the indigenous groups can and nations can actually teach us a lot. But on the side on the how can we push forward that the citizens understand themselves as political actors, which I agree it's very important for changing democracy and just create a deeper democracy. It's very important to understand that not all citizens would like to be like active political actors, and that is something very important because this is why there are citizen representatives that can be either political parties, either civil society, and just with this, I agree on what it was said before, that we need to act all together. But what we do need is just to have citizens that understand that many of the issues that they complain about, or the issues that they want to see, or the needs that they identify are actually political. And that they need to get somehow the idea of which are the political sense of what the community and what society and transnational groups needs to advance. So this is why, going back probably to the previous question, it's impossible to see all these challenges, including climate change, without seeing them as political challenges. Because at the end, it's the aggregation of these needs and the actions that actually can make us just to go forward. So I agree, in summary, I agree that we need to create more political actors from the citizens, which also will help us to push forward more the other representatives of citizens, such as political parties, to create solutions. But for that, we also need to understand that if we want to live in a politicized world that thinks about things such as democracy and transnational democracy, we need to understand two things. One, we do need more involvement from citizens, but also we need to understand that not all citizens would like to be active in politics, and that is also fine. So which is the balance? I don't know yet. But then it's important to understand that there are different levels of engagement, and on those different levels of engagement, we need to bridge with the other groups and stakeholders and processes, such as political parties and elections.
Thank you very much, Gina. Last word, you wanted to mention something?
I can only say the same words as you said. I'm really convinced that we have to find instruments that people can influence their surroundings, that they not only want to, but they can. And on the local level in Switzerland, we have, with direct democracy, we have instruments. We can use it, and we should use it, and we should do it also with all these programs in schools to really to convince that it's really good to use these instruments. But also on the international level, it's not so far away that we had international movements against treaties, economic treaties we didn't want. There were big initiatives against economic treaties. I don't know the word now in English, but we have also this tradition. I really think, as you told it before, a lot of topics always have been international and global, and I think we should find these good practices to use again, and it's not local against international. I think if you learn something in an international struggle, you can use it also locally, and vice versa. I think we should promote both and support both levels.
That's a very good conclusion. So we hear everything is political. There are different levels of engagement. There are different actors. There are parties, corporations, institutions, and social movements. And I think Siyana put it very well. We need to work really hard. At this point, I will have to close the panel. Thank you so much to my guests, Gina Romero, Rebekka Müller, Siyana Gurova, and Natalie Imboden. Thank you very much. And at this point, thank you so much. And thank you to you for discussing and listening tonight.
Thank you so much also from my side, also to you, Marguerite, Meyer. Thank you of being part of the discussion. There will be time and space now to maybe exchange further ideas or topics at the democracy bar down below. There's a little apero waiting for you. You're invited. Here at the Democracy Tower, we will continue the dialogue about issues in the democratic discourse. For example, next week at the 11th April, the economist and host of the monetary policy podcast Geldcast, Fabio Canec, invites to an exchange and discussion about the Credit Suisse takeover at this very bar, the Democracy Bar. And yes, thank you very much for participating, and I hope to see you soon. Thank you.